Hello and welcome to the Nebraska Department of Transportation's Central City Viaduct public hearing to discuss the draft environmental assessment and preliminary design for the project. Thank you for joining us. Please note that a court reporter is here today to record this presentation and the public forum. Once the presentation concludes, we'll open the public forum. For those that don't want to present their comment in front of their peers, know that you have the option to make one-on-one comments directly to the court reporter. The purpose of this public hearing is to present the project and gather public input as part of the National Environmental Policy Act, also known as NEPA. The project team is looking for feedback on the impacts of the preferred alternative in the draft environmental assessment. The Nebraska Department of Transportation and the Federal Highway Administration, or FHWA, will formally respond to all comments received during the comment period, which is open now through January 7th, 2025. We will begin with introductions to the panel, followed by an overview of the project. Then we will discuss the draft environmental assessment potential impacts and the anticipated cost and schedule. We will conclude with the public forum, which is when we will take comments. First, let's do some introductions. My name is James H. Kindig, and I'm the State Highway Commissioner for District 4. With me from NDOT are Eric Klein, District 4 Construction Engineer, Don Knott, Project Manager, Jason Juergens, Environmental Section Manager, and Sarah Fisher, Public Involvement Specialist. What is the National Environmental Policy Act that is referred to as NEPA? NEPA is a law that requires federal agencies to consider the environmental impacts of their proposed actions before making decisions. FHWA, in partnership with NDOT, is the lead federal agency for this project action. Under NEPA, FHWA and NDOT must document these impacts and make the information publicly available for comment. NEPA is addressed for this project through an environmental assessment, generally referred to as an EA. Currently, we have a draft EA ready for review and comment. The draft EA is available on the NDOT website. The draft EA is also available for review at NDOT District 4 headquarters, Central City Public Library, NDOT headquarters, and FHWA Nebraska Division. The draft EA examines project benefits and potential impacts on the natural and human environmental based on conceptual design. We'll discuss these impacts in detail in upcoming slides. Now I'll hand it over to Eric to present a project overview and recap the project history.
Thank you, Commissioner Kindig. Hello, I'm Eric Klein. I'm NDOT's District 4 Construction Engineer. Identified as the Central City Viaduct, the proposed project would construct a viaduct in Central City, Nebraska, located in Merritt County. The preferred alternative is located on US Highway 30 between C Avenue and 13th Avenue, and on Nebraska Highway 14 between 19th Street and just north of 10th Street. The existing US 30 and Highway 14 intersections downtown would be realigned to the west approximately B Avenue. US 30 would be reconstructed as a 3-lane curbed urban roadway with 12-foot wide lanes, sidewalks, parking between C Avenue and B Avenue, and between 16th Avenue and 13th Avenue. Between B Avenue and 16th Avenue, US 30 would be a 2-lane divided curbed urban roadway with a 4-foot wide raised median and 20-foot wide lanes with sidewalks. C Avenue and existing Highway 14 from US 30 to I Street would be designated as one-way pairs for northbound and southbound Highway 14. Highway 14 would be reconstructed as a curbed urban roadway with 12-foot wide lanes, sidewalks, and parking. A portion of Highway 14 would be constructed on a new alignment starting from US 30 halfway between 14th and 13th Avenues, proceeding north, crossing over the Union Pacific Railroad, and then proceeding west to connect back to existing Highway 14th at 10th Street. These improvements would consist of constructing a 580-foot-long viaduct over the Union Pacific Railroad. The roadway would be a 2-lane curbed urban roadway with 12-foot wide lanes and 6-foot wide shoulders and a sidewalk on the east side of the roadway. 2 existing at-grade Union Pacific Railroad crossings would be closed as part of this project, one at existing Highway 14 and one at 13th Street. The north intersection that ties into the existing Highway 14 would be a roundabout. The south intersection with US 30 would be a T intersection. As per discussions with Central City, existing Highway 14 from the railroad to just south of 10th Street would be repaired and relinquished to the city. The purpose of this project is to eliminate conflicts between trains and vehicles at the existing Highway 14 at-grade Union Pacific Railroad crossing. Reduce traffic congestion and associated delays at the Highway 14 crossing of the Union Pacific Railroad tracks and at the intersection of US 30, and to improve operations and reduce crash costs associated with the Highway 14 and US 30 intersection. NDOT identifies the need for the railroad grade separation structures by considering the potential number of conflicts between road users and trains, traffic delays, and crash costs. The highway rail crossing of Highway 14 and the Union Pacific Railroad mainline meets NDOT's thresholds for considering a grade separation. NDOT has also determined a need to address operational challenges at the intersection of Highway 14 and US 30. In summary, the improvements on this project would reconfigure the downtown intersection of US 30 and Highway 14 to a pair of one-way roadways, reconstruct US 30 from C Avenue to 13th Avenue, construct Highway 14 on a new alignment with a viaduct over the Union Pacific Railroad, close the Union Pacific Railroad crossings at existing Highway 14 and 13th Street, construct a roundabout at the intersection of relocated Highway 14 and 10th Street, and repair the existing Highway 14 between US 30 and 10th Street prior to relinquishment to the city. Additional improvements would include new paving, culvert and storm sewer work, guardrail, roadway retaining wall, fencing, sidewalks, pavement striping, lighting, pedestrian accommodations, and traffic signals. Now I would like to talk about the history of this project. In 1996, Central City requested that NDOT perform a study to determine if building a viaduct to carry vehicular and pedestrian traffic over the Union Pacific Railroad mainline tracks would be justified. In 2007, a NEPA review was approved by FHWA for the realignment of the Highway 14 along the old Burlington Northern Santa Fe grade bypassing downtown Central City on the east, and the construction of a viaduct over the Union Pacific Railroad tracks. In 2011, the project was reprogrammed for more simply as a viaduct project over the Union Pacific Railroad and no longer included the bypass around downtown. In 2016, a public information meeting was held to present information on various alternatives and gather public input and support for the project. In 2021, another public information meeting was held to present the alternatives considered but eliminated and alternatives under further consideration. The NDOT is committed to continuing the design of this project to meet the schedule that will be presented later in this presentation. Now, I will hand it off to Dawn to discuss the project alternatives considered and present the preferred alternative.
Thank you, Eric. Hello, my name is Dawn Knott, and I'm a design engineer and the project manager for the project. Several viaduct alternatives were considered for the project, but were eliminated. The alternative referred to as the on-alignment alternative would have involved reconstructing Highway 14 on its existing alignment and constructing a viaduct over the Union Pacific Railroad. The on-alignment alternative was deemed unfavorable as its adverse impacts on the central business district, removal of the direct connection of Highway 14 and US 30, increased costs, and impacts to numerous historical buildings. As a result, the on-alignment alternative was removed from further consideration. The alternative, referred to as the East Close alternative, would have involved constructing a new roadway along the Nebraska Central Railroad Company rail corridor between 13th Avenue and 14th Avenue, constructing a viaduct over the Union Pacific Railroad, and tying back to existing Highway 14 at 13th Street. The East Close alternative was deemed unfavorable due to steep grades, a required tilting of the roadway on the bridge curve, severed access to 16th Avenue, and impacts to the Central City electrical substation. The alternative, referred to as the West alternative, would have involved constructing the viaduct over the Union Pacific Railroad on C Avenue, starting near the intersection of C Avenue and existing Highway 14, and extending northwest towards the intersection of C Avenue and 13th Street. The alignment would have required a sharp right turn onto 13th Street and then would have continued east back towards the existing Highway 14. The West alternative was removed from further consideration due to issues with the existing roadway system, increased impacts on residences and businesses, and disconnection of Highway 14 and US 30. This alternative also received an unfavorable response from the public when presented in 2016. In addition, several intersection alternatives for existing US 30 and Highway 14 intersection were considered for the project but were eliminated. 3 roundabout options were considered: a 130-foot diameter roundabout and 2 160-feet diameter roundabouts. Each roundabout had varying degrees of performance, impacts on existing buildings, elimination of parking stalls, and changes to the road network. In addition, the 130-foot diameter roundabout was less favorable for truck movements, and the larger roundabout between B Avenue and C Avenue would have eliminated an entire city block of businesses. For these reasons, all 3 of these roundabout alternatives were eliminated. 2 standard T intersection alternatives were considered that would have relocated Highway 14 to a new alignment, either using B Avenue or C Avenue. Both of these alternatives would have resulted in greater impacts to the downtown businesses, elimination of more parking stalls, and less than desirable turning movements, and both were eliminated. The alternative, referred to as the East alternative, and the one-way pairs intersection alternative have emerged as the preferred alternatives for the project, presenting advantages compared to the other alternatives. These alternatives involve the construction of a new roadway along the Nebraska Central Railroad Company rail corridor between 13th Avenue and 14th Avenue, the installation of a viaduct over the Union Pacific Railroad, and a new roadway north of the Union Pacific Railroad that would connect back to existing Highway 14 at 10th Street. The downtown intersection of Highway 14 and US 30 would be reconstructed as a set of one-way streets. Between US 30 and I Street, Highway 14 would be one-way northbound, while C Avenue would be one-way southbound. This alternative best meets the purpose and need, minimizes impacts to businesses, and maintains regional and local road connections. Several intersection types were considered for the northern intersection of relocated Highway 14 and 10th Street. That included a standard 4-way stop intersection, a free flow curve, and a roundabout. Ultimately, the roundabout was determined to be the preferred option to address the transportation needs for the project by providing the best operations for all traffic movements and directing highway traffic to the new roadway and viaduct. The roundabout would be shifted slightly to the east from the existing intersection to avoid impacts to the house on the northwest corner, and would include pedestrian facilities, allowing for future roadway and sidewalk extensions. The house on the northeast corner would be provided with a new driveway access from the new roadway east of the roundabout. Several intersection types were considered for the southern intersection of relocated Highway 14 and US 30 that included a roundabout and a standard 3-way T intersection. The standard 3-way T intersection was ultimately determined the best option to connect the relocated Highway 14 roadway to US 30 without adverse impacts to the Dark Island Trail, as well as surrounding businesses, including the Fox Theater and the Merritt County Activity Center, and to maintain a more free-flowing condition along US 30. The original design for the one-way pairs alternative for Highway 14 and US 30 intersection was chosen because it had the least amount of impacts to the parking and businesses downtown. During the preliminary design, it was determined that the Citizens State Bank building at the southeast corner of the intersection would be impacted. To minimize these impacts, NDOT pursued and received approval for a design relaxation for this segment of US 30 to design for a lower design speed. This allowed the design team to modify the geometrics enough to minimize impacts to the bank. The result includes 2 wider driving lanes through the horizontal curve, separated by a raised median, and a reduced speed limit of 25 miles per hour. This design refinement will improve safety and operations of the intersection and allow trucks to more efficiently navigate this curve without off-tracking and reducing the potential for crashes. Over the years, the project has been developed. There have been various concepts that have included closing more than just Highway 14 and 13th Street railroad crossings. The other crossings proposed at various times were F Avenue and C Avenue. There was also a potential to construct a separate pedestrian overpass near B Avenue and possibly to restrict pedestrian crossings at existing Highway 14, C Avenue, and D Avenue, all of which currently have dedicated pedestrian crossings. Due to changes in the funding arrangements with the Union Pacific Railroad and other design refinements, the additional railroad crossing closures, the pedestrian overpass, and the pedestrian crossing closures are no longer included in the project. In summary, the railroad crossings at F Avenue and C Avenue will remain open for local traffic. There will not be a dedicated pedestrian overpass constructed, and the existing pedestrian crossings of the railroad tracks at D Avenue and C Avenue and existing Highway 14 will remain in place. It should also be noted that a sidewalk would be constructed on the east side of relocated Highway 14, beginning north of the Dark Island Trail along US 30 over the Union Pacific Railroad tracks and continuing to the roundabout at 10th Street. The sidewalk would be 8 foot wide from the north end of the Dark Island Trail to just north of the viaduct, and then it would be a 6 foot wide sidewalk from there to the roundabout at 10th Street. Pedestrian access throughout downtown would be enhanced and improved by the installation of curb bump outs, that's a tough one, and other design features, which would reduce crossing distances and improve pedestrian safety while crossing streets. Furthermore, the existing push-button crosswalk across US 30 at 15th Avenue would remain in place. As Eric stated earlier, the existing US 30 and Highway 14 intersection downtown would be realigned to the west to approximately B Avenue. The EA describes access to and from B Avenue north of US 30 being closed. However, NDOT recognizes the hardships presented by restricting this access and is now proposing to maintain access to B Avenue north of US 30. This change is represented in the mosaics you see today. This slide shows the typical section of US 30 from C Avenue to B Avenue. This section of US 30 would have 2 12-foot wide driving lanes, a 12-foot wide center turn lane, a 4-foot buffer outside the driving lanes, parking on both sides at various locations, and sidewalk. This slide shows the typical section of US 30 from B Avenue to 16th Avenue. This section of US 30 would have 2 16-foot wide driving lanes, a 4-foot raised median, as well as a 4-foot buffer outside the driving lanes and sidewalk. As mentioned earlier, the purpose of removing the center turn lane and constructing wider driving lanes is to facilitate large trucks maneuvering through the curve downtown. This slide shows the typical section of US 30 from 16th Avenue to 13th Avenue. This section of US 30 would have two 12-foot wide driving lanes, a 12-foot wide center turn lane, a 5-foot buffer outside the driving lanes, parking on both sides at various locations, and sidewalk. This slide shows the typical sections along relocated Highway 14. The top one shows the typical section on the viaduct. The viaduct would have two 12-foot wide driving lanes with 6-foot wide shoulders and include an 8-foot sidewalk with an 8-foot tall fence on the east side. The bottom one shows the typical section of relocated Highway 14 north of the viaduct, which would include two 12-foot wide lanes, 6-foot wide shoulders, and a 6-foot wide sidewalk on one side. This slide shows the typical section of Highway 14 one-way pairs south of US 30. Southbound Highway 14 would be on C Avenue, and northbound Highway 14 would be maintained on existing Highway 14. The one-way pairs would include two 12-foot wide driving lanes, parking, and sidewalk. I'll now hand it over to Jason to talk about the draft environmental assessment and potential impacts.
Thanks, Gon. My name is Jason Jurgens. I'm the Environmental Section Manager at NDOT, and I will be discussing the environmental resources that would be impacted by the preferred alternative. The impacts of the proposed project, along with various environmental resources, are shown here and are available for review in the more detail in the draft EA. The preferred alternative would require relocation of several utilities, including power lines, gas lines, telecommunication infrastructure to accommodate project construction. Underground utilities may be relocated or encased under new roadway, and adjustments to transmission lines and poles near the Central City Power substation would be required. NDOT would continue to coordinate with the utility companies during final design to identify specific impacts and relocation needs. 19 historic properties were identified near the project, but these properties would not be affected by the project as proposed. The preferred alternative would require the temporary occupancy of the north end of the Dark Island Trail, where it meets Highway 30. The Dark Island Trail would remain open to public and continue to operate normally. Alternative access would be maintained from the Fox Theater parking lot and the Central Park parking lot. The noise analysis indicates by the year 2049, the increase in noise along the roadway as a result of the project would be 1 to 3 decibels louder than if no project were built at all. This increase of noise is largely undetectable by humans. The preferred alternative would encroach on or run parallel to the Trouble Creek and Warm Slough floodplains. All floodplain crossings would be certified as meeting local floodplain standards and regulations and state minimum standards as appropriate. The preferred alternative is not anticipated to cause greater than 1 foot rise in the base flood elevation of the floodplains it crosses, nor will it increase the potential for property loss or hazards to life. Floodplain permits would be obtained prior to construction. The preferred alternative would permanently affect less than 1/10 of an acre of wetlands. Construction of a new box culvert for Worm Slough and the lengthening of the existing Highway 14 box culvert would result in impacts to streams. Construction of the preferred alternative will require a Clean Water Act Section 404 nationwide permit from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. 2 registered groundwater wells occur within the study area and may be impacted by the preferred alternative. Any registered wells within the project right-of-way would be properly decommissioned. NDOT would coordinate with the owners of any wells directly affected by the preferred alternative. The preferred alternative may affect, but is not likely to adversely affect, the northern long-eared bat and the tricolored bat. Avoidance and minimization measures for the bat species would be implemented during construction. The preferred alternative would require the acquisition of approximately 12.2 acres of new right-of-way north of U.S. Highway 30 and east of Nebraska Highway 14, including the acquisition and relocation of 3 storage buildings. The existing land uses of these parcels are predominantly residential, industrial, and commercial, and railroad land. The preferred alternative is expected to maintain established residential and commercial land use patterns within Central City without spurring major zoning or land use changes. If your property is impacted by this project, you would be contacted by an NDOT right-of-way representative once the design footprint has been established. Additionally, the project is anticipated to acquire 1.36 acres of temporary easements for construction. No right-of-way acquisition is anticipated in the downtown area. Pedestrian detours would be required during construction and will be assessed during the final design. Pedestrian detours may be variable throughout the life of the project and with changes in traffic and construction phasing requirements. The preferred alternative would modify parking in the downtown Central City. On-street parking stalls would be reduced due to proposed design. As previously stated, NDOT is evaluating the design that would maintain access to street parking along B Avenue from US 30. The proposed project would impact some of the streetscape and landscaping that was completed in 2018 in order to improve functionality of the new roadway configuration. Medians would be adjusted or added where necessary to optimize traffic flow and safety. Existing streetscape improvements would be preserved where possible, but when adjustments are required, they would be carefully relocated or adapted to fit the updated design. Key community elements such as flagpoles, flagpole holders, and memorial plaques would be treated with respect and would be relocated in coordination with the city to maintain their significance with the community. We are making thoughtful updates to improve local access and mobility. Crosswalk locations would be evaluated for safety and functionality. This may involve modifications to existing crosswalks or adding new ones if they are warranted. Parades and festivals are an integral part of the community and we will consider them during our final design. Construction schedules may be adjusted to support these events. Additionally, while the existing business and residential driveways would remain, some modifications may be necessary to align with the new roadway configurations. These changes would be implemented with attention to maintaining access and minimizing the inconvenience. The proposed project would be constructed primarily under traffic with lane closures controlled by appropriate traffic control devices and practices. However, designated detours would be provided for through truck traffic and on Nebraska Highway 14 and US Highway 30. The detour for Highway 14 would utilize Nebraska Highway 92, US Highway 81, and Nebraska Highway 66. The detours for US 30 would vary depending on the stage of construction and would utilize either Nebraska Highway 92 and US Highway 281, or Nebraska Highway 39, Nebraska Highway 92, US Highway 81, Nebraska Highway 66, Nebraska Highway 14, US Highway 34, and US Highway 281. Highway traffic detours will be further assessed during final design phase. For local traffic patterns, there may be short-term closures of side roads. Now let's talk about our next steps. Our timeline starts with this public hearing. Many activities need to occur before construction could start, including final design, right-of-way acquisition, and awarding the project to a contractor. Construction is anticipated to begin in 2027 with anticipated completion in 2029. Project costs are estimated at $35 million. Funding would derive from federal, state, local, and railroad funding sources. NDOT would do everything they can to maintain this proposed schedule.
Thank you, Jason. The draft environmental assessment is available for review at the locations listed on the screen or on the project website. The project team is looking for feedback on the impacts of the preferred alternative and the draft environmental assessment. Comments will be collected now through January 7th, 2025. For those without internet access, Sorry, I bumped it there. For those without internet access, information may be obtained at NDOT headquarters or by contacting myself or Wes Walgren. And the final environmental assessment will address the comments we received during the comment period. We will provide a reply to those who raise a question, need further clarification, or specifically request a response. We will consider every comment before moving forward with this project. The final environmental assessment will be posted on the NDOT website once it's completed and will include the comments received throughout the comment period. Staff will be available in the room next door. We've got display boards and mosaics on the table in there. So if you want to look at anything else that you saw during the presentation, feel free. And we will be around until 7:30. Thank you all for coming tonight and get home safely. Thank you.